Welcome back to the podcast Like a Pro growth series. This is part number 3. One of my favorite things to talk about, the monetization. How do I make my podcast make money? And I love this so much because this was something that I found difficult for a long time. Like I wasn't allowed to make money with my podcast, or I didn't know how to. And I see this with so many people. They either they want to know how to make money with the podcast, but they're not. Or they say something like, if my podcast starts making money, then it's not fun anymore, or I don't do it for the money, or something like that. And, here's my way of looking at this. If I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours and so much energy and effort and passion into creating something, I should make money off of it. It should make me money, and I should learn how to have it make me money. And also, when it starts to make you money, then you start to take it more real. When you have sponsors or people who are paying you money for your podcast, you have to keep doing episodes. You have to keep producing because they're paying you. And that's an incentive. That's incentivizing you to create and to move forward. Okay, so I'm just going to start the episode just by saying that you should desire for your podcast to make money. That should be a goal for you. Your podcast should make you some sort of income, whether that's $100 a month or $10,000 a month or more, whatever it is. And this is where I love the creativity of being an entrepreneur, because you can create out of thin air ways to make money with your podcast. Let's dive into this, okay? I've been on both ends of this. I had a podcast for years where I didn't make any money, and I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in that podcast. I have a podcast now that makes me a bunch of money, and I spend hours and hours on that podcast. Less time now, though, than I did back in the day, but that's neither here nor there. Here are 6 ways for you to monetize your podcast. Number 1, sponsorships. The most obvious one, getting a sponsor for your podcast. So I got my cheat sheet here. I'm going off my cheat sheets. If you see me looking down, I'm looking at the notes I made for you so I don't forget anything and leave anything out. Why would somebody sponsor your podcast? That's the first question. Why the heck would somebody sponsor it? First of all, you've got to have a track record of doing it. You've got to have a track record of like, hey, I do this thing and I've had guests on and it gets this much reach and here are the downloads and here's how many views it gets on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter or whatever, X or whatever it might be, okay? Why would somebody sponsor? So if somebody knows you and they know what you're all about, they know you're an expert or an authority in the thing that you're talking about, they know you're really good at this thing, they might consider giving you money to promote you, to promote them as a podcast sponsor. Or maybe they just love what you're doing so much and they believe in you, they want to support you. That's a beautiful thing also. But why is somebody going to sponsor you? That's a big question. Are you in online communities, right? So this is something that's been a game changer for me and anybody out there. These could be in-person communities also, but I found when it comes to podcasting, being a member of online communities opens the door to a bunch of different opportunities. So I'm in a bunch of different online communities. And so when I'm in these communities, I want to be able to promote the community, right? Here's my thought process. I'm in this community. There's a couple hundred people in here. They want to keep growing this thing. I have a podcast where I talk to new people. I talk to people all the time that are not in these communities, but would fit in them very nicely. So what if my podcast sponsor pays me money to be a sponsor on the podcast, so when I have a guest on, they see the sponsor and they wonder, what's this thing about? And it makes them want to be in that community, and I can make that connection. Like in the last episode, I said you can make a lot of referrals. I can make a referral into that community to help build those relationships, and that gets me sponsored. And that will lead us all also into another portion of this I'll talk about in a minute. But how many sponsors should you have? At one point in time, I had 3. I right now have 1. You can have as many as you want or as little as you want. That's up to you. How many sponsors do you want to have? I keep it at 1, and I have a 1-year contract for my sponsor because I don't want to think about it. I want to have it. The contract's done. The money's coming in. The sponsorship is happening. I don't have to change anything. It's out of sight, out of mind. My sponsor's there. We're good to go. But you could do as many as you want for as short or as long of contracts as you want. And what did they get, right? Here's the other thing too, and I was just having this conversation today with a woman that I'm working with. What do this podcast sponsors get? Because you can't just be like, hey, you're the podcast sponsor and that's it. So you got to be creative when it comes to this area. Be creative when it comes to this topic. And one of the big things, so I do audio and video, right? So on the audio version, I give the sponsor a shout out, and in the show notes, there's also a link to that sponsor. when I do video, everything I create through video is tagged with the podcast sponsor. And actually, I'm going to pause for 1 second so I can show you this. All right, so I'm going to throw something on the screen here so you can see this for yourself. This is from my StreamYard account. As you can see, the podcast sponsorship is right here. So like my video right here would be my video stream, and the podcast guest video stream would be over here. We're live on platforms doing the podcast. The sponsor, the Connected Leaders Academy, is right here the entire time. So the whole way through the episode, they get a sponsorship mention along with my coaching business. My coaching business is advertised right here. The podcast sponsor is advertised right here. And they also get commercials, right? So in the middle of the episode, I would click this button right here, and I would run a 60-second commercial that my podcast sponsor had created, and I run that in the middle of the show. So that's a way that you can build sponsorships into your podcast and have them be seen. Now, you could do this so many different ways. That's one of the ways. I just wanted to give you a visual example of what that actually looks like. And so the other question might be, how long are the commitments, right? So how long are their commitments in this thing? It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be a lifetime. That's up to you. I do a year at a time, like I said. So that's one way to sponsor. One way to monetize is to have a sponsorship, kind of like the staple, the easiest way to do it. Now, media kits. Let's talk about this. I love the concept of media kits. This is something that doesn't make me a ton of money, but I'd say about a little over a quarter of the people who come on the podcast will purchase a media kit from me. So the media kit is an upsell for any episode that somebody was on. And that media kit, it looks something, actually I'll just show it also, just to make this easier. So when somebody schedules, like the last episode I was talking about scheduling through Calendly or Zcal, once they schedule, they're going to get this image up on their screen where they are able, for $47, to receive an entire media kit of their podcast episode. So they get the video file, they get the audio file, they get 3 video clips of the episode, 5 social media posts, and a complete written transcript of the interview. So I use my StreamYard, which I can pull audio, video, and written transcripts from StreamYard. I use Opus Pro, which I already talked about in the last episode. Opus Pro I use to make clips of the episodes. I get 3 clips from Opus Pro, and then I use Canva to make 5 simple social media posts. And that's a $47 upsell that takes me, anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes to get all of that content together to send out. And also the content is good for me because I'm going to be downloading that audio file anyways to upload to my audio platform for the podcast. I'm going to be making video clips anyways to release as clips for my episode. So this is already, and I'm going to be using that transcript also later on for other pieces of content. So this media kit is something I'm already doing. I'm just able to now send it to them, and I send it to them through a platform called WeTransfer, which is absolutely free to upload anything, I think, under 2 gigs and mail it to somebody. So that's a huge game changer for me. So you put this media kit in the scheduler and also follow-up emails. So after they've been on the podcast, you send a follow-up email with an opportunity for the media kit and include whatever you want to include in there. That's what I include in mine. So another way to monetize is affiliates, right? If you listen to podcasts, you know the affiliates. They are On It, they are Casper mattresses, Blue Chew, these things. You can become an affiliate sponsor in that way, right? And you can get affiliate codes. I used to use a platform called Influencer Bridge. Influencer Bridge was like you could have access to affiliate sponsorships for major brands. I didn't find that helpful because somebody had to use my 15% off code and listen to the podcast. It's a bunch of crap. Unless you're a big podcast, right? One of the top 1%ers or 5%ers. That's, I think, when you come into a place where you can use that kind of stuff. But for me, affiliates, going back to this community aspect, are you in any online communities? And would these online communities benefit from you advertising to the podcast guests that you have on the show? Now, I don't want to make this sound like I'm just bringing guests on the show so that I can try to upsell them and make money off of them. That's not the case. But I know the guests that I bring on 90% of the time are perfect fits for some of the communities that I'm in. And these communities like the Connected Leaders Academy, which is the main sponsor for my podcast right now as this is being recorded, have been life-changing for me. So I know these podcast guests would have major benefits and find major benefit from being in these communities, right? So can I refer the guests I have on the show to other people? Do these other people have a platform or a product that I can market them to? So that's a question. Is this possible that I could market this to them? Oh, how did that light just turn off? Let there be light. Old school. I got the clapper over here. Nobody has a clapper anymore, right? And then what percentage do you get of that, right? So just think about the fact that you're in online communities or whatever that might look like for you. It could be a product. Somebody markets a product and you're just referring people to that person. I have a podcast guest on. I say, hey, you would be a great fit for this community. I want to introduce you to the owner of it. And they say, sure, that sounds great. I introduce them. If that owner then gets a sale and brings them into the community, then I get an affiliate fee for that, right? So I make money that way off of the podcast. So there's 3 right now for monetization: the sponsorships, media kits, and affiliates. Now, programs and courses is another direction to head in, right? So this is like more of a long game kind of play, because if you're building in programs and courses for what you do to teach whatever it is, you're an authority, your expertise, whatever that is, you can market those programs and courses inside of the podcast. So what is your expertise, right? I am a leadership communication coach. I have a 20-year background in broadcasting. I have certifications in personal development and life coaching and leadership coaching and communication coaching. So this is something that I've been doing my whole life. I'm an expert at it, which is why I love doing the podcast. And so my expertise is in what the podcast is. So you can run ads inside the show. If you have a course, promote the course inside of the show. Upsell your guests for an offer. So, I'm launching this podcasting program. If I have a guest come on and they don't have a podcast and they're interested in starting one, I'm like, hey, I have an online program where I help people walk through all the steps to launch a podcast, monetize it, and take it to the top and bring great guests on and make it something really tangible for your business that can be the centerpiece for your business, right? And teach them how to do that. So I can run ads in the show. I can upsell to guests who this would be beneficial for. And I can bring guests on that I know would be perfect in my target market. Now, once again, I'm not bringing guests just on so I can sell stuff to them. I'm producing a podcast because I love to podcast. I'm producing the podcast so I can connect with people, build relationships, and help people with the episodes. But on top of that, if I can help people through products and services, programs and courses that I offer, I'm also going to do that because I know what I do is beneficial and helpful. If you have something that is beneficial and helpful to others, you're an expert in it, you're the authority in it, then you're doing them a disservice if you don't give them an opportunity to work with you in that thing, because you're going to help them up their game in what they do. I firmly and truly believe that. Some people have a different way of looking at that, but that's how I look at it. So leave that option on the table, right? The next one is coaching and consulting. So if you're a coach or a consultant in a certain area, obviously, if you're the authority in something, then the podcast is an opportunity for you to do your coaching. You can have in the tag show notes of the show, contact me about coaching. You can have it in the intro and the outro. I have it in my outro, inviting people if they want to get unstuck from wherever they're at in their life, to get unstuck, to reach out to me. It can be an ad in the middle of the show. You can position yourself in the show. Who am I? I am Rob Z. Wentz. I'm a leadership communication coach. I help people find breakthrough in their life by becoming better communicators, by building systems and processes into their life that builds their leadership and changes and transforms who they are. Okay, so that is what I do. That's what I promote. So think about how you can market your coaching and consulting inside of your podcast. And last but not least, and this is where I'm heading to next for myself personally, is events and speaking, right? So imagine I have 140 podcasts at this point, episodes. There's only going to be more added to that. And I talked about in the last episode, making a spreadsheet of guests, right? So you make a spreadsheet, you put them in categories of who these guests are, what their expertise is. And then say, I want to host an event, and I want this event to be all about becoming a better communicator. I find 5 or 6 guests who are high-level communicators. I invite them to be guests in this digital event, or it could be an in-person event, but for me, I do digital events. This will be a digital event with 5 or 6 high-level communication experts. And then we have a virtual event where I charge, maybe $25 a person to be a part of the event. And now we're all winning. People are getting exposure. They're getting speaking opportunities. I'm hosting it. I'm making some money off of it. We're growing, we're expanding, and I'm creating different layers off of the podcast that help me to grow. These could be live or virtual events. You could do these on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, but you make yourself also opportunity as you're speaking to other people and you have guests on, and you're getting, like I said earlier, you're getting referrals for high-level guests. I'm getting these referrals for these high-level guests, and they might have speaking opportunities and say, hey man, listen, I am an expert in communication. I love to get up on stage and speak to people and help motivate them to be better communicators, to be better leaders, to host a podcast. How do you create a podcast and make it profitable, and all these different things? If you know a speaking engagement that I could be on the stage for, please let me know. And also, if they have a podcast, you could say, hey, and I'd love to be a guest in your podcast. And you could talk about it that way also. So what I love about podcasting, like I said before, in the entrepreneur mindset, you get to create whatever you want. This is whatever you want it to be, and you can create it. But today we went through sponsorships, media kits, affiliates, programs and courses, coaching and consulting, and events and speaking. 6 different ways that you can monetize your podcast and make real tangible money off this thing, so you're not just wasting money. Now, like I've been doing in every single episode, we talk about this free 33-page launch guide, Podcast Like a Pro launch strategy guide, everything you need to get your podcast off the ground. This is 100% absolutely free for you. I want to give this to you because if you're watching this, that means you're passionate about podcasting. If you haven't downloaded it yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Just go to the website, robzwentz.com. And if you have questions at robzwentz.com, you can simply click that discovery call link, get on a call with me. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about and get these podcasting dreams happening for you. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to catch you on the next one. What's coming up next? Let's see here. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about getting incredible guests, right? So this is part 4. Coming up next, the Podcast Like a Pro podcast growth series, how to get incredible guests onto your podcast. We're going to talk about that next.